How many of us here have experienced jealousy? Literally all of us, yeah. Of course, including me. In fact, when I was a young man, I was extremely jealous, and it ruined and spoiled early relationships. And some years ago, I went to see somebody who I respected a lot and said, "Can you tell me how to master jealousy?" And he looked at me as though I was crazy. And he said, "Master jealousy? You can't master jealousy. You can't master jealousy any more than you can master time or sickness or death. What you can do," he said, "is to develop your personal magnetism. And in that way, you will have overcome the negative effects of jealousy." I came to realize that we, all of us, in actual fact, are like conductors, electric conductors. Or, to be more accurate, we're like radio receivers. We think we're just this solid body, but in actual fact, what animates our body and surrounds our body and permeates our body is a type of electricity. We are like radio stations. We vibrate, we operate, our brains, our mind operates at a certain frequency. And if we are subject to jealousy or anger, then what our receiver, our frequency is tuned in to the same frequency as radio jealousy, if you like. And what we need to be able to do is to change the radio station, because the frequency from radio jealousy or radio anger is determining what we feel and what we're going to act.
All we hear is Radio Gaga, Radio Goo Goo, Radio Gaga. All we hear is Radio Gaga, Radio blah blah.
Most psychologists will try to help people to resolve things like anger and jealousy at a psychological level. But I'm afraid it simply doesn't work. And self-help books almost always deal with jealousy and anger by trying to help you to manage those conditions. But it's not managing the condition that is going to free you. When radio jealousy comes to you, you need to be able to change the frequency. We're dealing with deep and powerful techniques which, if you actually do follow them in your life, will change your entire state of being. You'll find that you will be able to change the radio station when that particular frequency calls. Now, in order to go through this subject tonight, I'm going to use a very well-known story. It's a fairy tale, so it's set in fantasy land. But if you actually understand or grab the meaning behind the story, then your subconscious mind and your intuition will understand tonight more than if I simply tried to address you at the intellectual thinking level. So let's begin. Once upon a time in midwinter, when the snowflakes were falling like feathers from heaven, a queen sat sewing at her window. As she sewed, she looked up at the snow and pricked her finger on a needle. 3 drops of blood fell into the snow. The red on the white looked so beautiful that she thought to herself, if only I had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood in this window frame. Soon after, she had a little daughter who was white as snow, as red as blood, and black as ebony wood. And therefore they called her Little Snow White. As soon as the child was born, the queen died. A year later, the king took to himself another wife. She was a beautiful woman, but she was proud and arrogant, and she couldn't stand it if anyone might surpass her in beauty. She had a magic mirror. Every morning she stood before it and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?" And to this the mirror answered, "You, my queen, are the fairest of all." Then she was satisfied, for she knew that the mirror spoke the truth. Now, most of you will know that Snow White grew into a beautiful young woman. She was as beautiful, we're told, as the light of day, and more beautiful than the queen herself. Then one day, when the queen asked her mirror who was the most beautiful woman in the land, the mirror replied, "You, my queen, are fair, it's true, but Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you." At this, the queen took fright and turned yellow and green with envy. She summoned a huntsman to take Snow White into the woods to kill her. But he took pity on her, let her go, and Snow White ran for her life. She ran over sharp stones and thorns. Wild animals jumped at her, but they did her no harm. She ran as far as her feet could carry her. And just as evening was about to fall, she saw a little house and went inside to rest. I think we all know who lived inside the house. 7 little dwarfs lived inside the house. After a night's rest, the dwarf said she could stay if she would keep house for them, make beds, wash, sew, knit, and generally keep everything clean and orderly. Then she could stay with them, and she would have everything she wanted. So all seemed well. But Snow White underestimated how determined the wicked queen was to do away with her. Back in the queen's bedroom, she stood before the magic mirror again and said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?" And the magic mirror replied, "You, my queen, are fair, it's true, but Snow White, beyond the mountains with the 7 dwarfs, is still 1,000 times fairer than you." Hearing this sent the wicked queen crazy, and she devised a crafty way of doing away with Snow White. In fact, as it turns out, she needed 3 attempts to kill Snow White. I call these the 3 poisons. First, she disguised herself as an old peddler, knocked at the door of the house where Snow White was hiding to sell her some colourful silk bodice lace. Snow White let the woman in to do up the lace, but she pulls it so quickly and so tightly that Snow White couldn't breathe. Fortunately, the dwarfs came home just in time to save Snow White from dying. So the queen tries another time. She calls again at the little house where Snow White is hiding and sells her a poisoned comb. She sticks the comb into Snow White's hair. The poison takes effect and Snow White falls down unconscious. Again, the dwarfs come back just in time to save her. Finally, the wicked stepmother makes a poisoned apple, disguises herself as a peasant woman and goes to the house where Snow White is hiding and tricks her into eating from the poisoned half of the apple. This time, the trickery works. By the time the dwarfs come home from work, Snow White is dead. When the dwarfs come home that evening, after she had eaten the poison, they found Snow White lying on the ground. We read, she was not breathing at all. She was dead. She was still so beautiful that they couldn't bring themselves to bury her in the black earth. So they had a transparent glass coffin made so that she could be seen from all sides. We need to pause at that point and learn the lessons that is going to help us in our relationship with jealousy and anger. There are 5 stages of what we could call mastery over jealousy and anger. 5 stages. This talk and this program that we have to help people in this has taken around 45 years to develop. So these are the 5 stages. And I definitely call them stages because each stage is in itself a process. And as you can see, the first stage is developing personal awareness. The second stage, expansion, understanding, separating thoughts from feelings, and finally, stage 5, freedom itself. And before we go any further, I want you to understand that every character in that story we've just read from is an aspect of yourself. In the same way as when you dream, your subconscious mind is living with aspects of yourself. Fairy tales and myths have a very important role and purpose, and they tap into our own unconscious. So let's see where it begins. The story begins in midwinter, we're told, when the Queen sat at the window and pricked her finger. You know, this is where most people live. They live in a kind of darkness. As far as their personal awareness is concerned, as far as their consciousness is concerned, as far as being able to know themselves deeply on the inside, as well as just simply what's going on around them, as far as that is concerned, most people live their entire lives in midwinter, in darkness. Because as I said at the beginning, what really affects us in relation to things like jealousy and anger is what triggers us in the realm of the unconscious, the subconscious mind. we can determine with our thinking brain that we're going to be different, be better, not be so disturbed, not be so obsessive, whatever it might be, not be so angry, not be so jealous next time. But what we don't realize is that what goes on in the subconscious mind won't change until you become aware of what it is that the subconscious believes about yourself. And that's the frequency that picks up the frequency of jealousy, anger, and other hot emotions such as this. So let's start with this story. Sitting at the window was the Queen. Now, who is the Queen in this story? Who does she represent? Well, in this story, she represents the baby Snow White's security, her survival even. She is the person who Snow White is going to rely on for a feeling of security, a feeling of survival. That appears that she's the baby's strength, but actually perhaps her total dependence on that source becomes her greatest weakness. Now, who is the Queen in your life? It may not be a mother figure or a father figure, although it may be, but for some people, it can be their work, their identity. It can be their bank balance. It can be their physical appearance. It can be their physical strength. It can be their skill that they have at sport or music or some kind of particular gift that they feel defines who they are. Take that away and my security is gone. Take that away and my survival as a person feels threatened. When the baby was born, the Queen died. So the baby experienced fear, insecurity, a belief in separation. And if we can begin to just open our mind to ourselves and ask the question, who is that Queen, if you like, in my life? What do I depend on to define me? What is it that, if that was taken away, I would lose all sense of security? The man I said that I went to ask about mastery around jealousy also gave me this little motto. What you resist persists, but what you're prepared to look at disappears. So when jealousy starts to ravage your nervous system, and that's what it feels like, doesn't it, when that surge of electricity, if you like, takes hold of the autonomic nervous system. It ravages the nervous system. But at that point, what is needed is for you to be alert enough, awake enough, aware enough to be able to stop. Stop what? might be too late to stop the surge of electricity. So we need to practice being able to stop what's going on in the thinking mind so that the surge of electricity isn't turned on when the situation arises. So instead of just allowing the situation to take hold of us and say, I'm feeling this because he's doing that, or she's doing this, what we need to be sufficiently aware of is what's going on in our head. This technique is called the stop. That's our first technique, our first metaphysical technique. And it begins with what I would call the outer stop. Now, you can practice this, and every day you could begin by putting a little alarm on your watch or on your phone and put it to go off at random times through the day. And the outer stop is that when the alarm goes off, or if you've got a partner that you're doing this with, then you could actually ask him or her to just shout stop every now and again. And you could reciprocate by doing the same for your partner. But whatever you do, an alarm or a partner, a random instruction needs to be given to stop. Just the word stop. And whatever you're doing with the outer stop, you need to stop as though you're frozen until you're given the signal to be released again, if you're working with a partner. Now that sounds simple, but it's not, because most of us are not sufficiently aware to realize that what is going on in our head is driving our action. We may actually wake up in the morning with an idea that goes on in the head, and you may actually go to bed that night and realize that most of your action that day has sprung from that one idea you had at the beginning of the morning. Your alarm will go off and you'll probably carry on doing what you were doing, and something might even be silently in your head saying, I remember that David Brown saying I should be stopped now, but I can't, I'm too busy. Or I'm on my way to do this, or I'm compelled to do that. You know, it's said that between every event and your reaction, there is a space. How big is that space? Or do you live your life reactive to the ideas and the thoughts that go through the brain, especially when radio jealousy strikes? So practicing the stop technique is designed to increase the space between the event and your reaction. Now, once you have been able to work with the outer stop, once you've been able to actually stop your outer action from being propelled by your thinking, then it's time to start the inner stop. And the inner stop is great. You become able to say to your thinking, stop. And you create a space in your mind where there's no thinking at all. Now, some people say that's impossible because my brain is just filled with thoughts the whole time. It is entirely possible for you to be able to say to those thoughts, stop, and create a space. To begin with, it may only be seconds. Now, what you'll be doing if you practice this regularly, you'll be going to the gymnasium of consciousness, of strengthening, working out our real mind, the mind that can actually observe our thinking and choose which thoughts are serving us and which thoughts are not. The way you'll begin to work towards that ability is to start by practicing the stop. Second stage, expansion. We've got to ask another question now. Who is the second queen? The second queen needed to be the most beautiful woman in the land. She became attached to her physical beauty in order for her security, her survival, to still be intact. She turned yellow and green when she heard that somebody's more beautiful than she was. But you know, jealousy makes us feel that somebody has got to die. If you think about that statement, you'll probably, some of you at least, will recognize that that's true. In the depth or the height, whichever way you want to call it, of the rush of energy that ravages your nervous system, you'll feel that if you can't stop somebody doing something, and you have got to put up with this feeling that somebody has to die, probably you. Of course, sadly, some people have projected that feeling outwards to the point where they have killed somebody else. Crimes of passion are, well, very common, more common than we wish to realize. But so there's more going on behind this so-called jealousy than meets the eye. There are these feelings. What we simply call jealousy is actually much more than that. The fear of death. Oh my God, I feel like I am going to die, or I feel that I've got to do something to somebody, either my partner or somebody who I feel that he or she is attracted to, or somebody has to die. You may not think it consciously, but this is the feeling that is communicated. Now, of course, it becomes worse because with such feelings going on, the one who's so-called feeling jealous is now feeling guilty. Guilty of feeling jealous. Ashamed of feeling jealous. Frustrated at the loss or lack of control that this situation is bringing about. Anger at somebody, anybody, until this situation can be diminished. And as a result of all of that, absolute terror. The person who is expressing jealousy is actually in terror. The first poison. Shame, guilt, fear. What happened with the bodice lace was that the old peddler, the wicked queen, laced it up so tight that Snow White could no longer breathe. And when we are tuned in to radio jealousy, radio anger, or radio fear, it's as though we can't breathe. Our breathing becomes tight. It becomes shallow. And as a result, we secrete masses of adrenaline, which puts us in fight or flight condition. And so we lose all sense of who we are, what's going on. We are just ready to fight. It's adrenaline, and it's a lack of breathing. And what we need to do when these strong energies are tuned into our frequency is that we need to be able to expand rather than contract. We need to be able to breathe. We need to be able to open. We need to be able to soften. And they are the opposite characteristics than what happens when we tighten our breathing through fear. When we tighten our breathing, everything hardens. Everything contracts. Everything shrinks, except the adrenaline, which goes crazy. Now, you can't tell a man or a woman who's drowning in a stormy sea to relax, but you can tell them to change their breathing, and then they might stop panicking. And that's exactly what our second technique at level 2 is all about. We need to practice conscious breathing. Now, the simplest form of this is to breathe much deeper and much slower from the belly, the diaphragm. Very simply put, you need to practice thinking of your belly area as like a balloon. And when you breathe in and out of the nose, you're filling and emptying the balloon. So many people are walking around these days actually adrenalized. That makes you a chemical target for radio jealousy. So we need to practice breathing in and expanding the diaphragm, the belly. Breathe, fill in the lungs from the lower part of the lungs, not just the upper part of the lungs. And when you breathe out, the belly shrinks because you're emptying the balloon. And then you practice 3-part breathing. Breathing in, retaining the breath, breathing out. 3-part breathing. Add a little count to each inhale, retention, and exhale. 1 to 5, about the pace of your heartbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Retention. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The great thing about this method of breathing is you lower your adrenaline and you quieten the mind. Because when you're practicing this, you'll discover, and this is why we call it conscious breathing, you can't think and follow your breathing at the same time. You can only do one or the other. Now, when you first start practicing, you may sit down for a 5-minute practice session, and after a few minutes or even a few seconds, you might feel that your thinking brain has taken you away from your breathing. Fine, use the stop. Don't carry on, don't try to push through. Use the stop technique. Just be compassionate on yourself, bring your mind back to your breathing and start again. And you may need to stop, start, stop, start to begin with as you practice conscious breathing. But after a regular practice, you'll find that you can follow your breathing. Some of you may even be able to increase the count from 1 to 5 up to 1 to 7 or 8 comfortably. Don't push it. And you'll find that for as long as you can follow your breathing, you won't be thinking. And that will be another way of interrupting the compulsive thinking that drives our actions. Third stage, we need an understanding as well. If you attach yourself, as it were, to this method of changing your state of being, changing your frequency, then you'll need to accompany it also with some research, study, interest, reading. These days there's so much available around particular subjects. So there is an understanding that is needed as well as the practices. For example, did you know that there are 7 types of jealousy? Now, you may think I've got a jealousy problem, but if you lump the whole experience that you have into just one generic jealousy title, then you'll miss an important key, because you may have an issue with jealousy, but I doubt that you have an issue with all 7 types of jealousy. And if you understand the type of jealousy, it's going to help you more to know what the ideas are behind that jealousy type. Now, the first type of jealousy is good jealousy. Not all jealousy is bad. Not all fear is bad. We would be lost in a jungle without the right type of fear. And there can be a good element of jealousy, which I call intuitive. And it could be that it is serving you, helping you, and preventing you from being a victim. So not all jealousy types are bad. However, the other 6 types of jealousy, you'll find don't serve us. Envy jealousy. Possessive jealousy. Deprivation, or feeling deprived. Competitive jealousy. Ego jealousy. And retroactive jealousy. That is a jealousy about what your partner may have lived in the past. And you'll be surprised how frequent that appears in people's lives. Now, the next technique that we're going to be dealing with here is that behind every type there are ideas. Ideas lodged in the subconscious mind. Now, if we go even deeper than that to begin with, the technique that I'm introducing here is what I call inner dialogue. It's to inquire and have a chat, if you like, but perhaps quite an extensive chat within, an inner dialogue, because within your conditioned self, there are many little yous, little selves. They were formed when I was at different ages. And when I was 5, when I was 9, when I was 12, 15, 17, 21, at different stages of our life, various things happened, and we decided certain beliefs that we have lodged in the subconscious mind. And those beliefs are still there. And they're not only ideas, they have energy with them. So they produce feeling. These are our little eyes. Now, people talk about the ego these days, psychologically, as though there's just one thing, an ego. But the ego is made up of dozens, hundreds of little yous and little me's, little selves, little I's. And here's some of them. Just 7 of them. A belief in separation. Now, a belief in separation brings basic insecurity and the sharpest cause of our feelings around jealousy. And it's an illusion, because there is ultimately no real thing as utter separation. Everything is even physically connected at one level, but we're connected at even higher levels than that. If we were to try to jump up in the air so that I wasn't on the same ground as you are, we would still be connected, because what we think is space is actually filled with energy. So we would still be connected at the level of energy. And some of you will know that we're even connected at the level of the mind, which is why such things as telepathy and so-called paranormal phenomena such as that takes place. So there is no reality behind the idea of separation. But look at the other little eyes that are here too. If we feel that without having control, we're going to have lost everything. The very fear of loss itself, of losing love, or losing a partner, or losing our job. Fear itself. Now, everyone experiences these things to a greater or lesser extent, but if you begin to inquire within, you'll just begin to become acquainted with some of your little eyes. And you'll find that behind what we call jealousy are a series of ideas that produce a series of feelings. It's called the ego. And it is far more complex and variable than most of us understand. And the ego is essentially scared. And when one is jealous, as we're beginning to illustrate here, you may appear to be manifesting a particular type of characteristic when actually your little eyes are terrified. Now, the sad thing is that whilst you may be afraid inside, when jealousy strikes, nearly always you'll go on the attack. Sound familiar? And of course, that then alienates you more and more from the one that you're afraid of losing. Now, how can we resolve this? How can we overcome this? Through an inner dialogue. Once again, this inner dialogue, just like the stop and just like the conscious breathing techniques, the inner dialogue needs to be a practice that you enter into, make a decision and commit to, and practice every day. These practices that we've been talking about are things that you will need to practice every day. The stop, the outer stop, the inner stop, conscious breathing, and now inner dialogue. Now, they don't have to take a long time. And you may find that some days you're forgetting to practice. It's okay. None of us are perfect, and that's why it takes so long to change our state of being. But keep your commitment, and when you realize you've forgotten to practice for a few days or even a week or whatever, renew your commitment, go back to it. The inner dialogue is, first of all, with yourself. What ideas, what type of jealousy am I experiencing? Is it because I'm feeling deprived, or I think I'm going to be deprived? Is it because I think I'm going to lose face in this situation? Is it because I'm thinking that my property is being threatened, whether that's a person or a thing? What type of jealousy am I experiencing in this particular situation? Dialogue with yourself, not in a confrontative kind of way, not in a harsh way, in a very compassionate kind of way. So the terrible feelings start, stop, sit down, breathe, then inquire within. What type of jealousy, what ideas are going on in my head? What is the fear that I'm afraid of right now? And you'll begin to find that as you dialogue within, you will get replies. This is where this concept of the mind rather than the thinking brain comes in. As you begin to use your mind to inquire about your thoughts, then you'll get answers from your mind. And your mind operates at a higher frequency than your thinking brain. And you'll find answers coming back to your questions. Where do they come from? It depends on your worldview. Where do the answers come from? They come from a higher frequency. your higher mind, if you like, your real mind, if you like, higher consciousness, whatever way you want to term that. But as you begin to ask questions, you will get answers. Then dialoguing with your little selves. That can be very revealing. Who are you right now? Where is this feeling coming from? Where is this thought coming from? And you can begin over a period of time to understand your little eyes almost like they're your family, and a somewhat dysfunctional family, if I might say. And you are like the perfect parent, and you understand the fears of your family. So you may have fearful Frida, or self-critical Cedric, or judgmental Josephine. A whole range of little selves. Now, the perfect parent doesn't want to assassinate their demanding children. Well, they may from time to time, of course, but rationally, they don't want to kill their demanding children. Neither should you want to annihilate your little selves, your little eyes, because they have actually been a part of your experience during your lifetime, your younger years. What they need is compassion. They need tough love, because you wouldn't do everything that a dysfunctional, demanding family requires or demands of you to do. But at the same time, they are part of your family, and therefore they need love. Similarly, as you begin to talk with and discover your little eyes, you'll begin to be able to say, thank you very much, Freddie, but I don't need you right now. The key practice in this dialogue is quite difficult, because you've got to begin to realize that these are not who I am. So it's not any longer, I am jealous, I am frightened, I am believing in separation, or I need control. No, it's controlling Christine who needs control, not I. Now, I'm not talking about dissociation. You're going to have to practice very hard to not say I, but to begin to look at your little selves objectively. And when you can understand more about your family of little eyes, you'll feel far more in control of your actual life. And you won't need to hide them. You won't be ashamed of them. It's just you won't let them come out and play when it's inappropriate. Who are you? You'll start with your name. You'll then probably panic a bit and say, well, I'm a bus driver, or I'm a this, or I'm a that. I'm a mother, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a wife, I'm a parent, I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm an accountant. Oh my God. And your partner still keeps saying, who are you? Eventually, you may come to a point where you run out of little eyes and you just give up and say, I am. I just simply am. I am. I am here. I am. At that level, you don't have a name, you don't have a gender, you don't have a title, you don't have a job, you have everything. Yet nothing that our little eyes depend upon. I am. It's great when you reach that realization. You've got nothing, yet you've got everything. You no longer need anything in that moment. Oh, don't worry, I'm not that idealistic. You've got to then live in the real world, so you've got to do a job and so on and so forth. But they are not who you are. And when you're able to enjoy having everything by having no thing, then that's peace indeed. So this is that okay, Andrea? Another inner dialogue can be to love itself, which is who you are. What would love do in this situation? Ask love, what would you do in this situation? In a way, it's like asking your higher self, because your essence is what we call love. It's the energy, it's the stuff of life itself. It's love. Now, most people spend their entire life frantically searching for love outside themselves. But it actually is to be found right where you are, inside you. And so in one sense, if you dialogue with love, you're dialoguing yet again with I am. If any of you have spiritual or even religious beliefs, then you'll know that I am is what great masters have always referred to themselves as. Who shall I say sent me, said Moses. I am sent you, the voice came. Who is I am? I am that I am, came the reply. Everything else is a construct that we ourselves make up. And it seems very real, but it's transient. The real mind, the real self, is I am, which can observe our thinking, can get to know and have compassion on our fears, our little eyes, and can live comfortably with all of that without being trapped in it. That's really what this is all about this evening. We can't change people's behaviour, but we can change our response and our reaction to it, which is then brings the last part of the inner dialogue. For those of you fortunate enough to have a partner with whom you can dialogue, then make time to sit down together. We recommend a practice that we call 20-20. Make a date with your partner frequently to spend 20 minutes uninterrupted where one of you talks all about your feelings around particular subjects, a particular subject, uninterrupted. And then at the end of the 20 minutes, your partner thanks you and then he or she has 20 minutes, not to respond, but to share his or her feelings around a particular subject. Of course, tonight we're talking about factors that seem to trigger jealousy. So they would be very relevant subject matter. But you'll find that your perspective, your perception will change, some of your defensive walls will melt. You'll find that a feeling of merging, of together, of safety and trust will develop between you and your partner if you practice 20-20 on a frequent basis. Now, it may be need to be a 40-40. It may need to be a 60-60. I remember once having a 90-90. It was around the subject of death. Liberating. Absolutely healing and liberating. It is all about being able to be less entangled through the frequency of our thinking mind and raise that level of consciousness, if you like, so that we can be far more aware of what's going on in our mind, what's going on in our feelings, what's going on in our life. And here again, stage 4. Once we have practiced these techniques, we're now at the stage where we need to look at the difference between thoughts and feelings. My God, there's so much problem and chaos that comes here when we mix up our thoughts from our feelings. Now, there's far more to us as human beings than, of course, meets the eye. All I can see at the moment is your physical appearance. But of course, going on inside us is an amazingly complex organism. And I don't just mean the organs, even though they are incredibly complex, but there's more than that. This is what we see, the physical body. But the psyche, that aspect of us that is the control headquarters, if you like, this is Houston. We have a problem because something is going wrong in the psyche. Our psyche is, we have centers. And these centers are centers of our movement. The will operates where we go and what we do. We have the feeling center. We have the thinking center. And then we have the magnetic center. Now, if we have no magnetic center open, then we will find that we are controlled and reactive by simply the energy and the frequency that drives these centers. Now, there is a key to these psychic centers. I don't want you to worry about this too much at the moment. This is just an evening introductory talk. But if you just take a quick look through those, you'll see that even the centers are broken down into subdivisions or sub-centers. Now, I'm not making this up. If you laid this model over a neurological analysis of the body and mind, you would find that the brain and the nervous system, the glands and the hormones fit this model of psychic centers. Of course, some of you may have heard of such things as chakras in Eastern philosophy. They developed this model thousands of years ago, and identified certain parts of the body that psychically were called chakras. Now, if you cut a dead body open, you won't find a chakra, although that's absolutely valid, but you will find synapses. You will find centers in the body where great nerve endings and major glands combine together that produce enormous feeling. And it's those energy centers that are the receiving station of all the cosmic, if you like, forces, energy. I'm not talking about stars and planets right now, although we can't dismiss that. I'm talking about the energy that all of the population spread around this planet, and also higher frequencies and higher consciousness. And these centers are receiving points, and they coincide with nerve endings, glands, hormones, and even the cells in your body. If you were to be able to see with certain types of vision, and certain types of cameras can actually take photographs of this, you'll find that you are therefore, as a result of these receiving energy centers, you are surrounded by an electromagnetic field. You may not believe that statement, but it doesn't stop it being true. And as I have said, in the 1930s, Dr. Kirlian developed a camera that was able to actually photograph our energy field, our electromagnetic field. And it changes this electromagnetic field like frequencies will change. It changes in density, it changes in color, depending upon the thoughts and the feelings that our energy is receiving from other people's energy and from higher faculties. Now, our wicked stepmother tried a second attempt to kill Snow White. How was it? The poison comb. The poison comb went in the head. It represents ideas, negative ideas, thoughts, beliefs. We've been talking about that quite a lot this evening. The poison apple represents negative feelings. This one finished Snow White off. This one actually killed her. If we begin to digest the ideas that the brain comes up with, that comes to us rather than from us, if we digest them, in other words, if we believe them, if we take them to be true without observing them, then it can be fatal in a sense. The jealousy, the anger, it can have its way with us. Now, if you are someone who feels that you're quite controlled by jealousy or anger, I want you to hear me really clearly. I've said a lot this evening, and you've taken a lot on board so far. But if you only take back one thing, I want this to be it. If you are controlled by a jealousy or anger, you are almost certainly fighting the wrong battle. And that is why you keep losing. Because you're probably fighting a feeling that you think is jealousy. When jealousy is a series of ideas, it's thought energy. It's not a feeling at all. And the more you go on saying, I feel jealous, the more you're consigning yourself to being weak and helpless. Because what you're feeling is fear. Now, if you knew you were feeling fear, you were afraid, if your partner knew that you were feeling afraid, then I can guarantee you the situation would be a lot different than if your partner thinks you're attacking or trying to control him or her. He or she would come towards you if you could say, I'm afraid. So instead of maintaining a belief that you are a victim to feeling jealousy, these practices here tonight will begin to help you to understand what your feelings really are at that time, and be able, therefore, to stay open and vulnerable, which will provide the response of love that you long for. Behind every feeling is the opposite polarity. You can't know how to be happy unless there was such a thing as sadness in the world. And do you know, behind the fears that we call jealousy, or rather the opposite polarity to the feelings that we call jealousy, are the feelings that you actually long for. And the most interesting one, or the most exciting polarity, is that behind the primal feelings that we call jealousy, the opposite polarity is passion. Who doesn't want more passion in their intimate relationships? And if you remain unaware that when you're being ravaged by the feelings that you think are jealousy, they are simply ideas, and the feeling is a feeling that can transmute into passion if you can actually dialogue sufficiently, stay open, and most importantly of all, to learn how to breathe through the negative feelings. As soon as we feel negative feelings, as we said at the beginning, we tend to contract and clamp down because it feels like we're going to die. But you won't die. And as you breathe through the feelings that your nervous system is being controlled by, you'll find that after a while, it dissipates. It begins to transmute. If you start out with fear and you sit and breathe through it, you'll find that after a while, if you were to say, fear, where are you now? You actually wouldn't be able to feel it. And then if you keep breathing, it will transmute into love or one of these feelings. You know, the worst energetic feelings in the world you need through practicing the stop and conscious breathing and inner dialogue. When the worst of life's feelings come at you, grief, jealousy, anger, these red hot feelings, you need to be able to be in a place of stopping and being able to say, come on, jealousy, I'm ready for you. Give me what you can. Give me your worst. Come on, grief. Come on, anger. I'm ready for you. I'm stopped. I'm breathing. You won't last long. I'm the victor here. And you keep breathing. Keep breathing. Deeply breathing. And you'll find you come through that and your whole consciousness will have transmuted into these opposite polarity feelings. I should have said at the beginning tonight, you haven't, of course, got to believe everything I say just because I'm standing here saying it, but try it. If you try it and sincerely, regularly do what I've said tonight, you will find what I'm saying to be the outcome. And retrospectively, you'll have come to believe what I'm saying. It's the direct experience that will change your state of being that is the important thing. This technique is part of the whole self-awareness that we've been talking about. It's technically called self-observation. Observing our own thoughts and observing our feelings and knowing, coming to know what is a thought, an idea, and what is a feeling. And the way that you deal with negative thoughts is to be able to observe them and let them pass. But the way that you transmute negative feelings is to sit down, experience them, and breathe through them till they transmute. Two different ways of dealing with the energy that our brain receives and that which our nervous system and glands receive. Thoughts and feelings. Step 5. Hooray! The prince arrives. We left out the end of the story earlier on. But now the prince enters the picture. Now I want you to remember what we said at the beginning tonight. Every aspect of the story is actually an aspect of you. Every character is an aspect of you. Here you are. Your mind, your real self, the I am, who you truly are. Do you know, I'm wondering whether I'm stretching the elastic too far here. Do you realize that you know everything that there is to know. At this level, potentially, you do. At this level, you have no need of teachers, no need of books. You have access to the very highest of consciousness. You are the source of the very things that you need. Whenever you need it, then just remember, you have it. And if you give it, you will find you no longer need it. I think I better say that again. You are the source of what you need. You are the light that you crave for, the wisdom, the capacity, the understanding, the knowledge. You are it. You're surrounded by a lot of darkness, but you are the source of what you feel that you need. And when you ask, like the inner dialogue, love itself, what is it that I need? You'll discover that you have it. And the key is, if you give it, even a small part of it, instead of looking to get it, then you will find that you no longer have the feeling that you need it or that you lack anything. I can see by your faces it needs just a little time to sink in. But sink in it has, because we're speaking a language tonight that only your subconscious minds can understand. Do you know, if somebody had walked in that room halfway through tonight's talk, they'd have thought we're speaking in a foreign language. And just a warning, when you go out from here, back out into that world out there, you can, if you're not careful, forget everything that has been said in here. Just like you forget dreams when you wake up in the morning. Why? Because your subconscious mind has received every single word and knows it to be true. I haven't told you anything you don't already know. All I've done is remind you of what you already know in your mind. And tonight, you understand it and know it. Of course, you'll find it hard to hold on to when you go out into the world out there. That's why, well, thankfully, thanks to our friend at the back, there will be a video of this, so that will be made available. So you can go over this talk, listen to it many, many times. Not because I think that what I'm doing is particularly great, but the information will go in and sink deeper the more repetitive that you listen to these concepts, because you know them, but you've got to remember them, reclaim them. So this is actually how you develop your personal magnetism, your electromagnetic field, how you change the frequency of your consciousness so that you can still live in that material world. Chaos can still be happening around you, but that you're not ultimately living on the same frequency. That you can observe what's going on, not only outside of yourself, but inside of yourself. And by doing that, you'll be able to choose what thoughts serve you and what don't, how to breathe, how to change your feelings, transmute your feelings, and how to be the light in a dark world instead of wishing to find the light. It's there within you all the time. Snow White and the Prince went to live in the father's castle. And that's really what we're talking about. When you develop your personal magnetism, you won't fear rivals. You won't fear loss, because you will have built a wall, if you like, of psychic defense against radio jealousy. You will have increased your connection with your sexual energy, which will increase your magnetic attraction. And you will have developed your creative mind, the faculty of creative imagination, so that you can change the circumstances of your world and even influence others who are close in your life, not by manipulation or by coercion or control, but simply by the power of your own real mind. I won't go into that too much right now, because that's almost the need of another talk. But this is what happens in what we call developing your personal magnetism. With this developed, your electromagnetic field altered, you will then have come as close to what we call mastering jealousy as is possible. In other words, you will have mastered yourself so that whatever happens around you doesn't have the same effect as it did when you came in here 2 hours ago. I would like to think that you will change, be able to change from this evening on. You know, everybody can change their frequency, their personal magnetism. Everybody. I've been studying metaphysics now for 40 plus years, 45 years. And I know this to be true. Everybody. It doesn't matter what your education is, what your background is, who you are, what your conditioning is. These metaphysical techniques are available and work for everybody. And I can promise you, if I can do it, you can definitely do it. I'm still on the path, and will be probably till the day I die, and so will you. So don't think that anything I've given you tonight is like a quick fix, and I don't pretend that. It's the work. It is the real work. It's of more importance than the work you do from 9 till 5. Because it's doing the work on yourself will even improve the work you do for your boss or for yourself. How do I know that everybody can change? Because there are universal laws. And laws work for everybody. If you drop a heavy ball, it will fall to the floor for everybody. It's the law of gravity. And there are other laws, many laws, universal laws, that work on a more hidden level, if you like. And these laws, the laws of vibration, which we've been talking about, the law of polarities or opposites, the law of attraction, the real role of sexual energy and sexuality can't be overstated. The laws of sexual energy, the law of transmutation, and the law of assumption, living in the finished state of what you create with your imagination. This is where then your affirmations come in as part of this, of course. This is the change, but you've got to do the inner work for it to actually work. A lot of people use affirmations, but they're just plastering heavy wallpaper over a cracked wall. That's just trying to use the power of positive thinking. And unless you can actually make these chemical and effects change on the inside and consciousness change, then affirmations in themselves won't necessarily work, but they are powerful in the right context. We're finished. What happened to the poor old wicked stepmother? The jealousy, the fears, everything. She got dragged out with red hot shoes, and we don't hear from her any longer. Of course, what happened to Snow White and the Prince? They lived happily ever after. And so will you.